3 weeks ago, lawmakers in Maryland in the United States voted to create a commission to study potential reparations for slavery and the ongoing effects of racial discrimination in that state. Welcome to the finals of the International Reparation Debate Competition put on by the Center for Reparation Research at the University of the West Indies. I'm your moderator, Dion Jacksonville. And I share that bit of information because I've been covering the issue of reparations for years, and it's exciting to see how far we've come, to see the kind of developments taking place in this area all over the world, just as it's going to be exciting to hear from our next generation of reparations activists this morning. Now we're going to start off by hearing from the director of the Center for Reparation Research at the University of the West Indies. She's known on social media as a culture doctor. We've been joking and saying we need to change that now to culture professor, since she's a newly minted professor. And the whole idea of this international debate competition in high schools, not just in Jamaica, but throughout the region, and as far as the United Kingdom, gives you a glimpse into the kind of vision that Professor Sonia Stanley Nair has for the area of reparations research. Professor?
Thank you so much, Dion. Her Excellency Mrs. Judith Slater, British High Commissioner, Professor Rupert Lewis, Professor Emeritus of the UWI, PVC Global Affairs, Miss Sandra Maynard, Friends of the Center for Reparation Research, members of our advisory board and network of scholars, distinguished debaters from start to today, our distinguished finalists, students and faculty of the UWI, greetings to our audience in person and online. I want to begin this morning with gratitude. The idea for this competition was born in a meeting I had in late 2024 with Miss Melissa Beckford, who is here this morning. We had some awareness of a local competition, but of course, as my brain got going, I began thinking about a competition that went beyond the confines of the nation, Jamaica, where I reside, and of course, the region. I began to imagine the conversations in the homes, at school, in the corridors, at the community corner shops and street corners, when students all over the region would be preparing and, of course, competing. This is where I firmly wanted to make an impact through education, but squarely with the ordinary citizens of the region. This idea was aligned to the mandate of the Center for Reparation Research in more ways than one. As we go about the business of education, research, and advocacy, this competition hit all the marks, because strengthening the curriculum across borders is vital for support in growing the reparation movement. So I begin with gratitude to our sponsors and partners, without which this competition would not have taken place. CARICOM, the CARICOM Reparation Commission, the Jamaica Association for Debating and Empowerment, the Repair Campaign, the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa-Caribbean Advocacy, the Wilberforce Institute at Hull University, the UWI Press, even the Central Information Office in the UWI. Even when we were setting up our website in relation to how the students would apply, they gave us vital support. UWI TV here today and our key partner for transmission of this debate. Staff of the Center for Reparation Research, there have been so many hands in the context of this international reparation debate competition. So I'm here to tell you today that we have a tough job ahead of us. In 2025, there are still persons in the Caribbean having conversations about the good Mother England did for its colonies, misunderstanding the reparation movement as a demand for cash handouts, saying, let the past stay in the past, and tackling and lacking recognition about the legacies of the slave trade and chattel slavery. But we are up to the task. Our only job is reparation. And I want us all to say this. Our only job is reparation. Our only job is reparation. This House believes that there is no monetary figure that will be enough to right the wrongs of the genocidal transatlantic trade in Africans and chattel slavery. This House believes that enslaved people were the primary agents of their own freedom. This House would require reparation from companies with historical ties to slavery. These points, of course, these motions were only the tip of the metaphorical iceberg in this, the inaugural staging of the International Reparation Debate Competition. So, of course, the competition, for those who didn't know, was launched with 24 schools, and we're really thankful to all our students. In fact, I've been told that it's the students that took the competition to the teachers, not the other way around. And so they have taken the task of education, research, and advocacy seriously through these weeks of preparation. And we also give thanks, of course, for the teachers and the wider networks which have supported them to enhance historical understanding. As you are aware, the current atmosphere for debate on reparatory justice for peoples of African descent is one that is fraught with a lot of, really challenging and problematic arguments. And so the business of education, with support from our key partners, even the Caribbean governments, and expansion of allies in the global south, this intervention that we need is broad-based and has, in the context of this debate, been used as a strategy for reparatory justice education and outreach. I want to say a special thanks to all the 24 schools which entered the competition. In this, the first staging, we were blown away by your commitment and enthusiasm. Next year, we will be back at it, and with greater support for teams far and wide. We are indeed already in conversation with schools in the UK in order to increase UK participation in the coming years. Thank you and welcome to the finals of the inaugural Reparation Debate Competition. Thank you and welcome to the University of the West Indies.
All right, you know, when Caribbean people step into a room or step onto a stage, we full it up, right? We make noise, we're colorful, we're loud. And in this area of reparations research, Caribbean voices are among the most respected on the global stage, the most influential, we're bold, we're innovative. From retired Justice Patrick Robinson to former head of the center, Professor Vereen Shepherd, to, of course, one of the most influential of them all, Vice Chancellor and Chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, Professor Hilary Beckles. And here to share some thoughts on his behalf, let me welcome Ms. Sandra Maynard.
Good morning and welcome everyone. Sorry, I didn't mean to knock the mic. It's a pleasure to be here and to see our schools discussing and debating this particular issue. It is rather timely, should I say that at this stage, as has been indicated by our previous speakers. This is a long-standing discussion, both in the fields of academia and politically. And it's certainly, I'm going to say, it probably dates back way before that with Professor Sir Hilary Beckles. But when we look at the evolution onto the stage, he really did begin, certainly, when he addressed the House of Commons and the House of Lords back in 2014 on this subject of reparations and looking at the economic underdevelopment, public health disparities, and educational gaps in Caribbean societies. This has been followed up in 2023, where on the Time magazine, he was a featured cover titled "Slave Reparations Are Coming." And it is really good to see that our younger people are involving themselves in this particular discussion that's very important historically to the people of the Caribbean. It is a difficult subject, and there's no doubt about that. And it's a very difficult subject, and particularly because those of us now, and growing up in the UK, but I am of Caribbean descent, I know that wasn't part of our education. And I can see how, in certain circumstances, people would say, well, why is this important? And I hope that as part of this debating competition, certainly points around that will arise. But it is very important to Caribbean people, and it is very important for the world to acknowledge what was done was, in fact, a crime. And what we have to do is advance that discourse in the hope that we will get people to understand, as we have done in many other crimes against humanity that have occurred in the past. But from an education standpoint, I'll say this, that this importance has allowed the university to develop its educational steps with regards to this. So, for example, in 2019, we partnered with the University of Glasgow and we established the Glasgow Caribbean Centre for Development and Research. And this actual commitment and collaboration is a £20 million commitment over 20 years to fund research and development initiatives, making it the first formal reparations agreement between the Caribbean institution and a European university. Now, the commitment to reparatory justice, when we launched this, the first, I'm going to say, global master's degree in reparatory justice, what the program actually does is it aims to educate and empower individuals into addressing historical injustices. And we want everyone to have an understanding of this. This isn't a, let's blame the world in this sense. It has happened. The question is, what are we going to do about it moving forward? And it has advanced, as in March 25th of 2024, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles actually addressed the United Nations General Assembly as part of the United Nations commemoration of the International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and Transatlantic Slave Trade. And during his speech, what he did emphasize was that the enduring impacts of colonialism and slavery on the Caribbean, and urged the United Nations to renew its commitment to decolonization and to support reparatory justice initiatives. He did argue that there is a moral and developmental, I will get my tongue around my teeth this morning, reparations are essential for healing historical wounds and establishing a more equitable global order. And these advancements have continued across Europe. So, for example, in December 2022, we had the Dutch minister, Mark Rutte, formally apologise for the Netherlands' role in transatlantic slavery and describing it as a crime against humanity. And his apology was echoed by King William Alexander in July 2023. And despite these acknowledgements, we know that the government has ruled out, or the Dutch government has ruled out, financial reparations in respect of that. But what it did do was it established a €200 million fund aimed at promoting social initiatives, education and awareness in the Netherlands, the Dutch Caribbean and Suriname to address the legacy of slavery. But I'm sure that you're probably all aware that last week, President Macron recognised the injustice in relation to Haiti back in 1825. And he has now commissioned a French-Haitian commission to examine the shared history and what has occurred. So this is very timely, this debate. And I would always encourage this conversation to continue. And sometimes we try to duck away from what is very painful. But in these circumstances, it's a necessity. So I wish both of you, teams, a fantastic debate and every success. And I look forward to seeing who the outcome winners are. So thank you all very much.
All right, now to get the competition underway, we have to know the rules. We have to know, who's going to talk first, who's going to talk next, how much time they have to talk and rebut and so on. So I'm going to welcome to explain all of those for us, Mrs. Melissa Beckford Simpson, who heads the History Teachers Association. And of course, we know the connection there. And please come, tell us what to expect.
Why don't we all just move on? Those were the words of Prime Minister David Cameron to the Jamaican Parliament in 2015. These teams are here to tell us that this can't happen, at least one of them, and another one will try to tell us why we should. This is what we are here to debate today. The motion is this House believes that teaching the history of the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans does more harm than good. That is the motion for today, ladies and gentlemen. And we have two very competent teams, as you've heard. On side government, we have Clarendon College. And on side opposition, we have St. Joseph's Convent. Now, the parliamentary debating style that will happen today is the Jade parliamentary debate format. And this was, of course, developed by Jade. To begin, the rules of the competition are these. The opening speech will be given by the Prime Minister, and the opposition leader will follow immediately afterwards. Both of these speakers will have 7 minutes to present their arguments. After this first round, both teams will now be engaged in a period of cross-examination. And in this period of cross-examination, both teams will ask each other 3 questions, my apologies, and these questions will last for 10 seconds and the responses for 30 seconds. Then we will go on to the next part of the debate. The Deputy Prime Minister will speak first, and then the Deputy Opposition Leader. And both speakers will speak for 6 minutes. They will then enter into another exciting period of cross-examination between them both. And the same thing applies. They will both ask each other 3 questions. The questions should be asked within 10 seconds and the responses given in 30 seconds. And then now we have a slight pause, a 1-minute pause for the teams to breathe, drink some water, solidify their arguments, and then they will continue. And this round, we will see the opposition reply speaker coming first, and then the government speaker will close out the debate. Both of these speakers have 5 minutes within which to present their arguments. During all of this, and while the speakers are speaking, the other side, whether side government or opposition, are allowed to ask points of information. And the teams have a period of time as well, a short period of time within to answer, or they can utilize their own time to respond. But we would want to hear the rest of the speeches, correct? Yes. And so the teams will and should ask points of information. And this is different from the periods of cross-examination that will happen. And so, ladies and gentlemen, those are the rules of today's match. That is the Jade parliamentary debating style that the teams will utilize today and that they have been utilizing for the entire competition. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see who comes out the winner. Big up to both teams and let the robust interrogation of the motion begin. Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to want everything to flow. So once we start, the speakers know what's expected, and we all look forward to hearing. So let us start, and let me hand over to Madame. In all cases, I see it's Madame, Madame Prime Minister, Madame Leader of the Opposition, Madame Prime Minister.
Ladies and gentlemen, education about the history of the oppression of a people can either be a tool for liberation or a tool for reinforcing trauma. What allows for education to be one or the other is not the topics taught, but how they are delivered. Therefore, we, the proposition, would like to firmly state that teaching the history of the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans, or TTEA for short, does significantly more harm than good, not because of the topic, but because of the current pedagogical approach taken. Your average high schooler learns about the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans through a rigid, standardized curriculum. They are taught by a teacher who is expected to simply deliver information, often in a lecture format, and test students on their ability to memorize facts, years, and names. In this setting, students are not invited to engage critically with the material, ask difficult questions, or relate the content to their own lived experiences. Instead, they passively receive a version of history unable to truly process its relevance, impact, or emotional weight. Where is the opportunity to understand how this horror shaped the blood in our veins and the names we carry? There is none. Students memorize facts and regurgitate them on paper. But inside, the lesson lingers, that the history of the African diaspora is one of subjugation, and that their place in the world is to suffer and survive, not to lead, not to thrive. This is exactly what Paulo Freire, in his work The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, described as the banking method of education, where students are treated as empty accounts to be filled by the teacher. Freire believed this model was fundamentally oppressive because it prevents learners from becoming active participants in their own liberation. It discourages dialogue, reflection, and consciousness raising. This is what he calls conscientization. The teaching of the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans today in many classrooms still follows this harmful pattern. When this topic is taught in a banking method that assumes dichotomy between human beings and the world they live in, Freire says an individual is a spectator rather than a recreator. This kind of teaching doesn't empower, it conditions students to fit into a world shaped by oppression rather than resist it. And that is why we say it does more harm than good, because it teaches history in a way that keeps students passive, not engaged. We learn about Oladoye Ekiano, we learn his name, we learn that he experienced this and he wrote an account, but do we open the book and study it and analyze it and discuss it with our teachers the way that Israeli schools discuss Elie Wiesel's Night of the Holocaust? The opposition says they want students to learn about the slave trade and the enslavement of a people. And of course, we all want all students across the world to have reverence for this grave and absolutely horrific period of history. And we do this with the intention that learning about it can empower them to challenge the lingering legacies of racism and inequality. However, defending the status quo, which our opposition seeks to uphold and claims offers us more good than harm, will not offer us this. This is not remembrance. This is not reverence. And when you trace the system back to its roots, you realize that this is not our system at all. Accepted.
The fact that students today are not listening about the brutality, but also about the resistance, the rich civilizations before slavery, and the ongoing legacies, creating empowerment more than harm.
Right. Our issue is not with these topics being taught, but it is the way that they are taught and the way that they are emphasized with regards to all of the other things that are occurring within African history. To continue, our education system was inherited from Britain, a colonial power that had no interest in nurturing Caribbean identity or liberation. And what good can we expect from teaching this topic when we are continuing to do so in England's pedagogical approach? Even worse, as you mentioned, African history is taught in the Americas and Europe as though it began with slavery. From primary school, students are introduced to African people not through the glory of their kingdoms, their intellectual traditions, or their achievements, but through their chains. Why is it so hard for you to name a single black figure whose legacy is not defined by resistance or white oppression? Why is it that we teach about Toussaint and Nani, but not Imhotep, Mansa Musa, or Queen Nzinga in the same breath? This should be taught first. And compare this to how the Holocaust is taught in Israeli. This is taken from the the Israeli Ministry of Education.
Point of information.
Declined. Children are introduced to the brilliance of their culture first, their thinkers, their faith, and their resilience before they are taught about genocide. Their oppression is contextualized within a legacy of strength, not as the first chapter. If that isn't a pedagogical problem, then what is? When slavery is taught primarily as a story of powerlessness and victimization, with the current banking method of pedagogy, it does more than inform. It deeply affects the psychological development of students, particularly those of the African diaspora. During adolescence, a critical time for identity formation, as described in Erickson's theory of psychosocial development, students are particularly vulnerable to internalizing messages about their race and their place in history. If the dominant narratives they encounter emphasize subjugation or this constant need to fight without also highlighting pre-colonial civilizations and agency, students may inherit a sense of trauma and inferiority. Claude Steele and Joshua Aronson's 1995 concept of stereotype threat shows that students underperform when they fear confirming negative stereotypes about their group, a common experience for Black students navigating a curriculum saturated with ancestral suffering. In classrooms where Black students only encounter these narratives and are rarely offered examples of greatness before colonial times, they are more likely to fear confirming negative stereotypes about Black intellectual inferiority. And yes, this study found that this did significantly reduce their academic performance. In contrast, we argue for emancipatory pedagogy, which views students as active co-creators of knowledge and encourages reflection, dialogue, and transformation. We want students to read and discuss the first accounts, and this should be a mandatory part of the curriculum, not an option. Additionally, students should be first met with pre-colonial history that showcases the richness and strength of Africans from various tribes and kingdoms before delving into the horrors of the slave trade. Through student-centered dialogic approaches, this topic becomes not a detached narrative of victimhood, but a pathway to critical consciousness where students develop an internal locus of control, a sense of pride, and the tools to challenge injustice. When classrooms prioritize empathy, voice, and critical inquiry over memorization, the teaching of the TTEA can become what Freire calls a practice of freedom, not oppression. We are fully justified in arguing that teaching the history of the TTEA causes more harm than good on the basis of the heavily flawed pedagogy. In parliamentary debate, motions like this are evaluated based on the status quo, meaning how things are actually occurring now. As such, the opposition cannot shift the debate by suggesting that in some ideal future it could be taught differently or argue on the basis of the principle. We are debating the present, and the burden is to defend the way that it is taught now. Thank you.
Excuse me, we would just like to ask, what does the bell indicate exactly?
Yeah.
Okay, so the bell indicates when you're entering and leaving a period of protected time. So let's go through it. So the first time you hear the bell, that means you exited your protected time. That means you can accept or decline points of information. The second time you hear the bell, that means that you're in point of information, your protected time again, no points of information. Then you're going to hear the bell ring twice. That means that you've elapsed your allocated speaking time, but we give you about 15 seconds to wrap up. After that 15 seconds, you'll hear, which means that you've elapsed all the time allotted to you. No more time for speaking. Yield the floor.
Thank you
All
very
right? No
much.
problem. No problem.
All protocols observed, the opposition remains resolute against the motion. This House believes that the teaching of the trafficking of enslaved Africans causes more harm than good. We in the opposition agree that there are flaws in the method, but we argue that even in its current form, teaching this history does far more good than harm. We accept the definitions posited by the opposition with the exception of the word harm. Harm caused by the teaching of the trafficking of enslaved Africans in this case is more like temporary discomfort that fosters long-term justice awareness and healing. The burdens. The proposition burden is to prove that the act of teaching this history is inherently harmful, even when taught well, and that these harms are so deep and widespread that they outweigh all educational and social benefits. We must prove that the current approach generates more harm than good, and two, the harm is not inherent to the method but as a result of poor implementation. And 3, that the teaching of enslaved Africans creates civic awareness, empathy, prevention of recurrence, and general social progress. The status quo. The history of the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans is already being taught, but with growing care and impact. Students today are learning not just about the brutality, but also the resistance, the rich civilizations before slavery, and the ongoing legacies of inequality. Yes, some schools get it wrong. Reform is being done for more inclusive, trauma-informed, and empowering education, making it the norm. Mr. Speaker, we are not for the current way of teaching this history. The motion didn't state the current way. We are for the best way of teaching this history. Allow me to rebut. And this best way is trauma-informed teaching. This would be training teachers to handle emotional topics with care, no graphic reenactment, use check-ins, and create safe spaces. This builds resilience instead of re-traumatizing students. And 2, balancing the story. Don't stop at brutality. Teach about African civilization, resistance leaders like Nani of the Marus, and achievements of the African diaspora that restores pride and identity. 3, we would center real voices, use first-hand accounts, African scholars, and cultural sources to humanize the content and shift away from cold textbook trauma and link the past to the present, which will let students reflect through debate, which is already being done, and modern connections to racism and justice. This transforms discomfort into action and purpose, including Black educators. Involve Black voices in teaching is as authenticity, prevents tone deafness, and build trust in diverse classroom. This is credible as the RAN program has a similar approach, and it has proven to be working, as it has a 94% increase in the racial unity and empowerment. Allow me to rebut the misconceptions provided by the government. The government stated that teaching of trafficking of enslaved African causes discomfort and psychological harm. But let me say that discomfort is not harm, Mr. Speaker. And the 2019 UNESCO states that students taught slavery alongside resistance have greater empathy and understanding of justice. And secondly, discomfort is necessary for growth and historical reckoning, just like the Holocaust education or genocide studies. They also stated that the current method does not include the history before slavery. But Mr. Speaker, let me say that this is a big misconception. Most syllabi incorporates the history of the Africans before they were colonized. We don't learn about slavery before we learn about Mansa Musa. We don't learn about slavery before we learn about Songhai Empire. It is in the rationale also
Points of information
that the teachers should use discussions to actually engage the students. In today's debate, I will bring 2 substantive. 1, the current methods build civic awareness, empathy, and critical thinking. And 2, discomfort from learning is not the same as harm. It leads to empowerment. My second speaker will discuss justice and the prevention of repetition in the injustice, while my third speaker will prove why we remain supreme. Our first substantive is the harm lies in the method, not the content. My first warrant is balanced teaching that includes stories of resistance and survival, reduces emotional harm, and builds empathy. When we emphasize both suffering and human dignity in the trafficking of enslaved Africans by teaching resistance, African agency, and survival, we shift from trauma to empowerment. It does more harm than good because it builds pride, resilience, and understanding. For example, the Holocaust education isn't taught by showing only images of death camps. They come with stories of resistance, survival, and moral courage. It fosters pride, empathy, and moral courage instead of guilt or division. That's why balanced, trauma-informed teaching benefits are supreme. My second warrant is effective, safe teaching already exists and work. We're seeing programs like Facing History and Ourselves offer concrete evidence that teaching hard history can be both emotionally and safe, intellectually enriching. According to a 2021 RAN Reparation study, students in these programs which is a reform program by the way, show that 94% increase in civic agency, meaning they felt more empowered to take social action and reported deeper empathy, stronger historical understanding, and more open-minded attitude. And the fact that we're seeing this in real classroom, Mr. Speaker, proves that harm is not inherent to the topic. It's about how we design the curriculum and support teachers, and we are currently doing this now to reform. If we have models that work, and we do, then the moral burden shifts to improving delivery, not erasing the content. What my third warrant is suppressing this history causes more harm than good. Mr. Speaker, be aware that we're not talking just about the current history. We're talking about the teaching of the history overall, because that's what the mood says. place. In environments where slavery is ignored or downplayed, misinformation spreads like wildfire. Students grow up believing that slavery was minor, that racism is just a mere relic of the past, or that systemic inequality is simply an overreaction. This ignorance sustains real-world harm, and contrary to this, we're seeing that countries like Germany, who have faced their history head-on with regards to the Holocaust, show lower levels of historical denialism and far-right extremism than those that whitewash. The impact, it promotes social equity and activism, because when students learn this history accurately and empathetically, they become more socially aware, engaged, and ready to challenge injustice. And 2, it empowers empathetic, informed citizens who are empowered to fight modern injustice. And 3, it protects future generations from repeating injustice itself. My second substantive is silence enables racism to thrive. My first warrant is when schools avoid teaching slavery, they leave students with distorted or incomplete narratives. In the absence of formal education, when students are left to piece together understanding from biased media, peer opinions, or online misinformation, the result is a deeply distorted view of race and history. A 2018 SPLC report showed that only 8% of the US high school seniors could identify slavery as the primary cause of the Civil War. When students believe that slavery was a voluntary arrangement or that racism ended in 1865, it undermines every effort to promote justice and equality today. Silence gives racism plausible deniability that it suggests falsely that if we don't talk about injustice, it must not exist. The impact, it ensures future generations. And with that, the proposition momentarily rests.
Thank you very much to the first speakers, Juliana Solomon from St. Joseph and Shana K. Willis from Clarendon College. Can we give them another? Before we move into the cross-examination, thank you. Before we move into the first period of cross-examination, a reminder to teams that we are from different countries with different accents, and so the rate at which we speak can make it difficult for our opponents to hear us, and we want to be very mindful of that. All right. With that said, we're going to enter into the very first period of cross-examination. As was so eloquently explained before by Melissa Bedford-Simpson, we will start with the opposition team posing questions to the government team. That is, Clarendon College posing a question to Team St. Joseph's. Your time starts when you ask your first question.
How do you, am I being heard? Okay. How do you address the fact that the current curriculum includes more than just the slave trade and hence is balanced?
Including more than just the slave trade does not at all imply balance, because if you speak about something for one session as opposed to compounding on something else for 3 to 10 sessions, it certainly is not balanced.
What proof?
Okay, are there studies showing that students who learn this history in a balanced, trauma-informed way were harmed?
We do have evidence of students learning about genocide and terrible historical events happening in the emancipatory pedagogy, which we are arguing for, which is actually not the present situation. We have evidence of that doing well in Israel, but that's not the present. That's not the status quo. And the motion places the burden on you to defend that status quo, which is the present.
What other methods of teaching other than the ones that already exist are being currently improved are for the same level of improvement as the I'll ask the question again. What other methods of teaching other than the ones that are already existing and being improved currently are for the same level of awareness as teaching the slave trade currently?
Teaching such harrowing experiences as though it's a science subject, teaching it just based on simple, vague notes or just regurgitating information absolutely does not cover the topic efficiently. Actually engaging students with film, with literature is much more effective.
And as we provided the method by Paulo Freire Portuguese philosophist. He provides a very detailed scope of what methods can be used to effectively teach our students about this history.
Additionally, culturally responsive teaching and trauma-informed care is not actually something that's being implemented.
All right, thank you very much for that first half of cross-examination. We now invite Team St. Joseph's to pose questions to Clarendon College.
Okay, so by suggesting so many improvements as you did, do you therefore agree that the current system is flawed and therefore harmful?
Okay, we see that the current system is flawed and causes harm. However, that harm is minor. 94% of people benefit from this. And additionally, with the current system that has been implemented, we still see people making revolutionary movements. We still see people uniting and working with each other. And we still see people advocating for justice for one another and not just for themselves.
Additionally, the Pew Research states that most...
All right, that is time elapsed. Your next question, St. Joseph?
In your experience, how much time do schools typically spend on the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans?
There is no current specific data to state about how much time the teachers spend on teaching the trafficking of enslaved Africans, as usually they use a syllabus and they actually teach about the civilization of Africa before going into slavery. They teach about how the Caribbean was before they were shipped to the Caribbean. The Africans were shipped to the Caribbean, so they don't only talk about slavery. And even after they learn about slavery, they learn about the impacts of slavery and how it impacts our society today. We learn about why the Caribbean is the way they are today. We learn about why US and the UK.
All right. And for your final question, St. Joseph's.
Can you highlight the difference between discomfort and long-term psychological damage and harm?
Okay, so discomfort is having tough conversation, listening to the truth and understanding the truth and understanding that this is important towards growing, understanding unity, and psychological harm now is actually being traumatized. And this is actually at its minimal right now because I've proven it in my speech that Pew Research states that most students who learn about history feels empowered. They feel the need to actually participate in reparations. They feel the need to actually...
And that is time. Thank you very much. Can we give them a round of applause? At this point in time, we invite the second speaker from St. Joseph's.
Am I being heard? Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin with rebutting my opponent's points. As my colleague said, in parliamentary debate, motions like this House believes that are evaluated based on the status quo as of now. They are talking about the future, but this debate requires us to talk about now. Agreed, it is taught well. It is not taught well. But if it is taught well, it will do good. But right now, if it is not taught well, it will do harm right now. Moving on, I must admit, I was quite taken aback when I read this motion for this debate. How on earth are we supposed to defend such a motion? How could we justify the statement, the teaching of the history of the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans does more harm than good? It seems pretty impossible, right? But my team and I, we sat down and we actually thought to ourselves. We actually realized that this issue has a lot more depth to it than you initially realized. So I would like to ask everyone, as you listen to this debate, to remove any preconceptions you may have had when you heard this motion and instead sit down and think. Think critically and creatively, as this is an uncomfortable conversation which confronts our fundamental values. As my brother once said, it is only when you start to get uncomfortable that you actually start to address the issue. So, without further ado, beyond the critical issue of how this topic is taught, we must also consider the broader context of our society and how it contrasts with what we tell students in schools. In school, we naturally demonize colonialism and educate on its horrors, while simultaneously glorifying it in the broader society. Through language, arts, and culture, we still uphold colonial values. Think of the street names of slave owners, the use of plantations for weddings, the admiration of colonial architecture, and the beauty standards we uphold our sons and daughters to. Little girls are told to embrace their natural curls, but on billboards they still see Caribbean women with straight flowing hair. This just perpetuates cognitive dissonance, which is when an individual's beliefs and actions contradict each other. So where do these practices come from? How do we define our intelligence and success? Why do we choose to speak this debate in standard English instead of Creole? We all know the answers to these questions, and we all know they're rooted in European customs. So what message are young students supposed to take from this? Are they not supposed to wonder about the value of their heritage? Does the opposition not see that this can distort how young Black students internalize their self-worth? Within this framework, people are easily predisposed to develop internalized
Point of information.
rejected. Develop internalized racism and cultural inferiority, which would thus distance themselves from African names, dialects, and overall identity. How are African people supposed to rally behind this reparations movement if they don't even fully identify with their enslaved ancestors? The reality is that teaching about slavery without challenging colonial glorification does more psychological harm to the young Black student. Before we expect this curriculum to have a positive impact, we must address these underlying contradictions through removing monuments of colonizers, renaming certain public institutions, and attempting to reform our popular culture. Naturally, some aspects run too deep, but we owe it to still try. Now, even if these solutions are fully implemented, is the harm regarding this issue solved? Not fully. Like my colleague aforementioned, we must consider the effects of the way it is taught. If slavery is solely presented
Point of information.
Decline, thank you. If slavery is solely presented as a story of powerlessness, brutality, and victimization, students may internalize a sense of inherited trauma, especially since our schooling is constantly reinforcing that they were oppressed, and that in fact still are in some ways. The opposition claims that this is necessary to invigorate resistance, but overcoming this oppression requires more tangible action, a mental action. I say this because when you think of yourself as oppressed and consistently tell yourself that you are, your subconscious will believe you. You will subconsciously start to act oppressed. You will, the study understands...
Point of information.
Understanding the impacts of negative self-talk clearly explains that the negative stories we tell ourselves impact us negatively too. Thus, you must control the narrative you tell yourself, or else nothing will change. The king of reggae said it himself: emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. Of course, in order for this to have any true effect, it must be a collective effort starting in schools, starting with literally telling our students that they need to take control of their narrative to help them realize that oppression is not the only part of their story. Now, I must clarify, we do not mean to teach them about the TTEA. We do not mean to say that do not teach them about the TTEA, but that we must also teach them more.
Point of information.
Accepted.
Are you saying that we should put the teaching of the trafficking of enslaved Africans at its minimal and not talk about the trauma and reduce the truth?
That is not what I'm saying at all. As I said, we will include that, but we'll also teach them more, give them more context and tools to process what the TTA means to them and their future. By using Paulo's phrase method described before, we can avoid reinforcing an inferiority complex while ensuring that students are well educated on their history. This can be further facilitated by other reforms of our educational system. The curriculum should be revised to include more non-colonial details on African history, and history students should be allowed and encouraged to explore the connection between past and present events. A complete transformation of our education system and its teaching of history is absolutely necessary, as once again, it is based on the British Cambridge model, which opposed twisted values of intelligence and success. In order for children across the world to come to peace with this chapter of history, we need to teach our children in a structure which fosters curiosity. This structure should be needs-based, skills-focused, and ultimately kindle critical thinking through open and encouraging group discussions. Assessments can be used to encourage children to take their work seriously, but it should not define their success. CXE should consider facilitating this transition if they actually want to make the teaching of the TTEA in the Caribbean do more good than harm. Lastly, agreed, we may need to include more details of the atrocities, but it must be done in a certain way or else it will do harm. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. That was Kellis Mitchell, second speaker from St. Joseph's. We now invite Alia Mackenzie, the Deputy Opposition Leader from Clarendon College.
Protocols observed, I will first address the flaws in the proposition stance. The proposition has presented a misconception among us that people still do not appreciate their culture even after being taught about the transatlantic slave trade. However, we have seen that we appreciate different forms of our culture, such as our music, food, as well as our language. And additionally, we have to remember that slavery and racism is a centuries-old thing. It has been a part of our history for longer than it hasn't. Hence, it cannot be easy to erase this in such a short time. Additionally, they say that at current there are no trauma-informed ways to teach these topics. However, we have seen in the United States in different middle schools, Fort Dodge Middle Schools in Ottawa and as well as Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School in Germantown, and many more schools that their methods being in place now
Points of
that are
information.
effective, not accepted. I present my first claim. The knowledge of the transatlantic slave trade is the first step towards justice. My first warrant. Knowledge leads to action. Despite the way that knowledge is taught now, grassroots and political movements have emerged, and we can see this in past and present as people learn about the injustices of slavery. And recently as well, descendants of slave owners have stepped forward, expressing their desire to work alongside reparations movements. For example, Laura Trevelyan and her family, who up and learning about the horrors of the slave trade in its current method of teaching, and their ancestors' involvement, apologized to descendants of the enslaved in Grenada and contributed £100,000 towards education. While this amount is small, its impact on educational access and empowerment, as well as its symbolic significance, far outweighs the guilt that they may have felt. My second warrant. This part of history is the most crucial evidence we have to demand accountability. European states cannot fully grasp their moral and legal responsibility without acknowledging the countless human rights violations committed during the transatlantic trade. History proves that awareness drives advocacy. Abolitionists were only able to challenge slavery by first uncovering evidence, which is now our history, and sharing it publicly, sparking a movement that eventually led to abolition. And today, in the current method that teaching this topic is taught, we see similarities in demand for reparations. The Netherlands, despite their formal apology for its role in the transatlantic slave trade, now faces legal reparations claims from former Dutch colonies due to its failure to provide targeted reparations to descendants of the enslaved. Without access to historical knowledge, despite the way it is being taught, I will say again, affected communities would still not have had the confidence and the legal standing to challenge one of the world's wealthiest nations. The opposition is aware that education alone cannot guarantee results at this level, but it is the catalyst for any further action. The impact those students may not immediately act on what they learn is that, one, their foundational knowledge empowers future leaders and activists. Two, as people are more educated on this topic, we see new policies come into play as a result of revolutionary movements such as the civil rights movement in America. And three, those educated on the transatlantic trafficking see the struggles of the enslaved and recognize their need for justice. And this all occurred in the current way that it is being taught, which is undergoing improvement each day. My second substantive, teaching the transatlantic slave trade in its most effective method preserves historical truth and prevents repetition. My first warrant is this prevents future generations from repeating injustices. The slave trade is one of the most horrid accounts of human rights violations, and in past we have seen that the failure to properly educate people of past mistakes caused them to repeat this. This can be seen, for example, with the Rwandan genocide of 1994, which was a result of a failure to incorporate divisions and previous massacres between the Hutus and the Tutsis groups in history lessons, where context Belgium, the colonial power in past favored the Tutsis and persecuted the Hutus. However, the situation flipped, giving the latter more power. The past was not taught in schools, which one, perpetuated tension between the groups as the disadvantaged groups felt like their side of the story was not highlighted, and two, caused citizens to ignore the warning signs leading to past violations which caused it to be repeated again. Mr. Speaker, this is a result of neglecting to teach the topic. Had they given formal attention to this topic and overcome their fear of whatever guilt they may have felt, their occurrence could have been prevented. My second one, proper education on this topic provides a well-documented account of the experiences of the enslaved Africans. Teaching this history formally involves sharing records from archives, economic logs, and other reputable sources, and most importantly, from multiple perspectives. We have seen in parts of Europe, for example, where past governments limit the teaching of the transatlantic slave trade and instead focus on other movements after the more empowering ones, rather, downplaying the severity of this portion of history to remain favorable in the eyes of their people and avoid accountability and keep their masses ignorant, and it caused the voices of the enslaved to be further silenced after their death. The transatlantic slave trade is more than the dehumanization of the enslaved, but it also entails resistance, their contributions to modern day society, and it is important to acknowledge their struggles and strength. Organizations such as UNESCO and even former colonizers have recognized the need for this part of history to be preserved and has funded efforts globally. The impact of my argument is that the students gain a full understanding of history rather than a distorted one that weakens their understanding as a whole. This complete understanding fosters discussion, change, allows students to recognize early signs of injustice and seek to prevent it, and empathize with the affected, as well as honor the people who experience the atrocities. The opposition rests for now.
And thank you very much. We now enter into the second period of cross-examination. And once again, we invite the opposition team to pose questions to the team in proposition. Ready when you're ready?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
This is directed to the deputy government. If discomfort is often the first step towards growth and justice, then how do you justify saying that teaching TTA causes more harm because it makes people uncomfortable?
Can you repeat that question, please? I didn't fully understand.
If discomfort is often the first step towards growth and justice, then how can you justify saying that teaching TTA causes more harm just because it makes people uncomfortable?
We did not say that it just makes them uncomfortable. It has long-term psychological effects on how they view themselves, value themselves, and connect with their past. That's all, thank you.
How will solely celebrating Black achievement without detailed context of their experiences in a balanced manner that incorporates everything like it does now foster appreciation for the people?
Can you repeat that question?
How will solely celebrating Black achievement without a detailed context of the experiences foster appreciation for the people in the balanced manner that it is taught now?
Well, one, it's not taught in a balanced manner right now, and two, we're not arguing for the complete erasure of this topic from the history syllabuses. No, we think that this topic is included. What is wrong right now is that the way it's being taught is causing a lot of harm. That is what we think is wrong, not the topic.
It needs to be taught in addition to other things, like you said.
The next question, Clarendon College. Your next question.
Can you provide evidence that racial divisions decreased in schools that soften slavery education?
Pardon, could you repeat that question?
Can you provide evidence that racial divisions decrease in schools that soften slavery education?
Why should we prove a claim that we never made? We never claimed that. You claimed that. If you think that is true, then that is on you to see how that is true. We never said that.
All right, thank you very much. Now we invite St. Joseph's to pose questions to Clarendon College.
In societies that continue to glorify colonialism today, such as the Deep South in the United States or even some Caribbean countries, how do you ensure that history is taught without distortion, the way that it is today?
Okay, so for one, that was in the past where they really glazed over this history and focused on the parts that made their country look good. In recent, where we have seen that they have incorporated it more, given more attention to it than they did before, it actually fostered unity in the classroom.
Additionally, the pedagogy that you suggested is a Portuguese, and they would basically give us Eurocentric worldview of the teaching of the transatlantic enslaved Africans, which will actually be biased and actually create more harm in the classroom as the African narratives will feel.
That is time. Your next question.
Okay, thank you very much. So my next question was, do you think that students learn better when they are actively engaged rather than passively listening?
At current, there are actually instructions in syllabi right now that state that the teachers should be actively engaging these students in discussions. Hence, it is already being implemented at the moment.
And that is why we're here right now, because we're having a debate. We have interform debates or in-class debates about historical injustices, about other historical important topics too. So, of course, the teachers have methods that they use to engage the students to ensure that they listen about the history, they learn about the history, of course, in a trauma-informed way, because it is literally in the rationale of the syllabi.
In CXC's current history syllabus for CSEC and CAPE, are you allowed to sit and write an essay connecting the past to the present with regards to the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans?
Yes, and yes.
I'm sorry, how do you finish your question?
No, we are not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm genuinely asking. You can re-ask a question, you have 10 seconds to ask.
Okay. We would like to ask that. So, in the current history syllabus of the CAPE examinations, are you allowed to talk about connecting the past with the present, or are you mainly asked to just recount what happened in the past rather than actually connecting it to the present?
Yes, we learn about that. In my history exam, there was literally a question that stated, what are the impacts of slavery on the Caribbean? What are the impacts of slavery on the United States? What are the impacts of slavery on the UK? So yes, we learn about the impacts of slavery on our current world. Yes, we learn about the impacts of the trafficking of the Atlantic slave trade. In fact, we literally have a topic entitled the Metropolitan Movement, which literally comes after we learn about slavery. We learn about the industrialization, which comes after we learn about slavery.
And thank you very much. Now, after that heated cross-examination, we're going to pause the debate for 1 minute. So you can take a sip of water and also put the finishing touches on your reply speeches. At this point in time, we invite the final speakers for this debate, the reply speakers. To conclude the debate for Team Clarendon College, we invite Akela Holness. Here, here. Give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
A pleasant morning to you all.
Good morning. Good morning. Drop the laptop so we can see your face.
Okay, sorry. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Mr. Speaker, without knowledge of the past, we stumble blindly into the future, doomed to repeat the mistakes of those who came before us. Ignorance of our collective history is a recipe for perpetuating injustice, and silence in the face of oppression will only embolden the oppressors. Honorable judges, worthy opponents, and fellow debaters, today we gather here to discuss a crucial topic: whether the history of transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans causes more harm than good. While our opponents have raised concerns, we like to assert that their arguments are indeed flawed and undermine the very fabric of our educational system. Permit me now to highlight the clashes in the debate. The first clash, Mr. Speaker, is that the proposition is not against the teaching of this topic, but how the history is taught. Mr. Speaker, the opposition, specifically my opposition leader, has countered this. The current teaching methods surrounding the history of the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans have proven to be effective in fostering awareness, empathy, and critical thinking among students by utilizing multiple disciplinary approaches, incorporating sources. By using historical accounts and cultural context, educators engage students with the complexity of the subject matter, encouraging them to grapple with the difficult truths and historical injustices. This method, this promotes discussion that challenge preconceived notions and foster a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of history with contemporary social issues, thus preparing students to contribute thoughtfully to ongoing conversations about race, inequality, and justice in our society. Additionally, empowering students through projects, discussion, and community engagement allows for a more personalized connection to the material, reinforcing the relevance and importance of this critical history. The second clash, Mr. Speaker, is the psychological harm and the trauma. Mr. Speaker, we have argued that challenging discussions, especially around difficult topics, will be beneficial for students. Engaging with these complex issues will foster resilience, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence, which are crucial skills for navigating the world. Rather than causing harm, these learning experiences can prepare students to confront the real-world challenges and encourage empathy towards others. Encourage empathy towards others' experiences. Additionally, when educators provide supportive environments and proper guidance, students can process these discussions safely. Mr. Speaker, ultimately leading to personal growth and greater understanding. Mr. Speaker, the clash of oppression. We have argued that the very purpose of this educational approach is to challenge and dismantle structures of power and inequality. This aims to empower students by encouraging these students to question and critique the dominant narratives and to recognize their own agency in effecting social change. far from contributing to oppression. It fosters a deep understanding of systematic injustice. Thereby, this equips students with the knowledge and skills to advocate for themselves and others. Classrooms that emphasize this critical thinking enable students from marginalized backgrounds to voice their experiences and perspectives. This facilitates a more inclusive and equitable educational environment. By actively involving students in discussion about power, dynamics, privilege, and justice, this promotes a sense of solidarity and collective action against oppression rather than its perpetuation. The pedagogy that you mentioned will actually create more harm than good, Mr. Speaker, which this narrative will continue to lead to societal harm, and as Africans were further denied of their rights. Mr. Speaker, lastly, we emerge victorious in this debate because the opposition has demonstrated that the existing teaching methods are not inherently flawed and are undergoing enhancements that promote better educational practices. Additionally, we have shown that any psychological effects related to this issue can be mitigated through adequate support for students, which will reduce the temporary harm. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, this is why we firmly oppose the motion that the teaching of this history does more harm than good, and the opposition rests.
Position, we invite the reply speaker, Christina Barkant.
No, I'm Christina.
That's Christina.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Is it good?
The microphone is on.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Before I conclude, for what feels like the billionth time, we would like to reiterate that our debate today is based on the current flawed status quo, not based on a fantasy the opposition is attempting to employ to get their point across. I would also personally like to add that things being included on the syllabus, as we all know, it absolutely does not ensure that it is actually enforced in the schools, and this is the reality. Millions of African women were snatched from their homes, beaten, raped, and forced to breed for their rapists. And we all know, and while we all know this to be factual, Caribbean students sitting the CSEC and CAPE examinations are often advised not to use language similar to this by their teachers for fear of being marked down for the crassness of this language. The crassness of the truth, I should say. This summarizes the inherent flaws in the way in which the transatlantic trafficking of Africans is taught to young students. These flaws are certainly not trivial and certainly not temporary discomforts, and as emphasized by both the leader and deputy leader of the proposition today, they surmount to making the teaching of the TTEA more harmful than it is beneficial. When students have to censor the truth in order to maintain decency, how could we ever say that what is being taught does more good than harm when students are being taught to water down the truth for the sake of a higher mark? When we have to sugarcoat the true experiences of our ancestors in order to get to the end of the syllabus, then something absolutely must be wrong. Any subject taught with the goal of completing the syllabus as opposed to teaching students has already fallen short. But when history, the very lifeblood of who we are today, is watered down and decompressed into a hard to swallow, quick to digest and move on pill, is when we know the system in place has utterly failed. Discussing the atrocities done to our ancestors with the intent of occupational efficiency at the forefront as opposed to empathy is not only morally corrupt on the part of some teachers, it robs students of the opportunity to fully sympathize with those who came before them and truly understand the extent to which they were abused. Without a true understanding of the past, how can the youth ever build up foundations for a Caribbean future? Not only is the history that is taught incorrectly, we are withheld the full realm of knowledge when the syllabi act as though our genesis was with slavery. Not only does this perpetuate the colonial notion that they are the center of the universe, it reinforces the concept that we are forever the weaker, inferior group in the face of their greatness. Placing sole focus on us as the helpless victims not only allows colonial powers to continue to evade accountability, it conditions us to believe that we have only ever been victims. How many teenagers today can discuss an African hero who was not a revolutionary fighting against colonization? We are being taught that without them, we are nothing, because even in our attempts to escape them, they can still lay claim to being the inspiration behind our successes. Describing this failure as a temporary discomfort, besides being an underhanded tactic which serves to downplay the true severity of the situation in order to win this debate, it's also completely untrue. Nothing about these long-term effects on who we are as a people today and tomorrow is a temporary discomfort, but instead is a great defeat. Additionally, I am so glad that the opposition has agreed and even assisted us in providing solutions to dismantle the system adopted from our very own oppressors. Instead of halfway teaching about the TTEA or promoting a victim mindset that keeps us stuck in the past or ignoring the royal ancestry that came before the genocide, emancipatory pedagogy should be made the focus of the CSEC and CAPE syllabi. A syllabus focused not on passes and marks, but on actually informing students about their roots and promoting regional pride and integration. One which inspires critical thinking and the linking of the past to our present for a better future, without students being shut down for wasting class time. I studied and loved Caribbean history for 5 years, but I can firmly say that the majority of what I love and know about our region and its culture came from my own research and hunger for knowledge. I'm sure many of us here today can say the same and can agree that we are in the minority as youth. Most youth could care less to engage in a discussion such as this, and they could care less to dig deeper and access resources, and that is not their fault. Instead, they are victims of a system focused on pumping out workers rather than Caribbean residents who are aware of the extent to which their ancestry, both the good and the bad, are able to utilize this awareness to improve our society for the better. A maimed horse cannot gallop, a muted lion cannot roar, a clipped bird cannot soar, and a generation fed only notions of inferiority, laced among ritualistic and empty robotic rehashing of genocide, rape, and exploitation, can never birth a future Caribbean society that can be proud, that they can be proud of as their own. In no way, shape, or form are we saying that the topic of the TTEA should not be taught. We're saying that the way in which it is taught degrades any benefit it may have. The mishandling of this information, as well as the promotion of harmful ideology which undermine any value given to us when this is taught, causes the net gain of this teaching to be less than zero. What is lost is more than what is gained, and without the implementing of our mechanism, this opportunity to teach and nurture more youth will be led astray. But what we present today is undeniable that ultimately teaching of the trafficking of enslaved Africans does more harm than good to the youth, to us, and to me. I thank you.
And thank you very much to Kellis Mitchell for concluding this debate. Another round of applause for our finalist teams.
Okay. And Mr. Barrett, over to you now for the adjudication report.
The reparations movement is certainly looking good with the mobilization, galvanizing of young people to the cause. And this competition is certainly a testament to that. Ladies and gentlemen, the two teams that contested the debate, we had St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, and we have Clarendon College, St. Joseph's, of course, out of Trinidad, Clarendon College, out of Jamaica. The motion contested, this House believes that the teaching of the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans has done more harm than good. And we felt that it was an interesting approach taken by St. Joseph's Convent. They told us that the form and the substance of that aspect of the history curriculum is problematic. It's problematic because it teaches rote learning and it gets people to just swat for the exams. But they don't get an opportunity to internalize, to digest, yes, and to be nourished by the information. And of course, they say to us that the substance, the information in the curriculum is problematic because it teaches people that they are victims. It teaches them a kind of victim mindhood, yes? And it ultimately gets them to feel as though they are weakened and less than within the community of human beings, of nations. And so to those kinds of ideas, we get a challenge from Clarendon College. Clarendon College tells us that no, there is a lot of empowering narrative within that particular curriculum. They say to us that there are ideas surrounding the greatness of the African continent. They tell us that the revolutions and the revolts are also embedded within the curriculum, and Caribbean students can feel a sense of greatness were they to be taught this curriculum. They say to us somewhat implicitly that there is a need for improvement in the curriculum and a greater level of emphasis on those particular aspects of the curriculum, but they say that it is doing more good than harm. We felt that the team that did the better job is the team that better marshaled their case in terms of argumentatively. We were challenged as a panel with some expressions of what we thought were poor stylistic demonstrations. So the rapid 100 miles per hour speaking, yes, that was a little challenging, because we want to encourage the debaters. When you're debating, you must pause a little bit and allow the information to settle within people's consciousness, yes? And so the reliance on putting out the information in as rapid a form as you possibly can, particularly within an international context such as this, where accents vary, is somewhat a challenge. And it does impact overall the persuasiveness of the information being delivered. That said, the team that won is a team that delivered the better content and did it better stylistically. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the inaugural International Reparations Debate Competition, held here in Jamaica, but featured teams from across the Caribbean, in the UK, and certainly in this match, a team from Trinidad, a team from Jamaica. The winner is, give me a drum roll, St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain. Congratulations, St. Joseph's. And another round of applause for second place team, Clarendon College. And that, ladies and gentlemen, on the panel, I should remind you, were 5 adjudicators. So there was Professor Rupert Lewis from the University of the West Indies here, very distinguished gentleman. We also had the British High Commissioner, Mrs. Judith Slater. We also had 3 adjudicators from Jade. We had Ravon Thomas Matthews and Javon Downey. And then, of course, rounding it out, myself, Jermaine Barrett. The best debater in this match comes to us as well from the winning team. That's the third speaker.
Yes.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Congratulations to the winning team. And also, as I said from the beginning, I thought you all did an amazing job. So looking forward to seeing what happens from here. Now, just before we have the announcement of winners and prizes and the handing out by Professor Stanley Nayo, I know you all were really impressed by Casey in her first performance. She's going to share one more item with us, and then we go into the prizes.
Satisfaction is real.
Waiting for the room to settle a bit. This is an original piece entitled Fat Pigeons. Ever notice how on any given street in Western Europe, you will always find fat pigeons? These vagrants, roadside power line squatters, always manage to be well fed with round, taut bellies, hobbling, almost dragging on the ground. Patisserie afterthoughts scatter in front of an idle, park bench audience, inciting a crass avian brawl, while beggars sit helplessly and homelessly looking on. The pigeons will say that it's easy for them to pick up crumbs because they have beaks built to peck. The pigeons will say that the beggars can't pick up crumbs because their fingers are too thick, their nose is too broad, their lips too full, their hair too curly, their skin too dark. It's as though they're just not built for a certain life of dignity and freedom and bread. Mother England, round and rosy, from gold and blood, pecked from our soil, with wings fluttering, squawking, jabbing pointed beaks over land that was already governed, over people that were free, over bread baked by beggars' hands, chained to her flagpost. Mother England, who sang our patriots to sleep with lullabies that were full of lies, gave them trading blocks and building blocks to play with, nursed them into beloved regionalism and lofty political paradigms only wings could reach. So when crumbs stopped falling from idle park benches, when European unity turned stale, and faces, pale, no longer sing of home and glory, Mother England, like fat pigeons, will simply fly away and leave us beggars plucking helplessly at crumbs and hoping for bread.
Okay, guys, Casey Garvey, and remember, look out for her non-governmental organization, Jaiku Poetry. That's Jaiku. Think haiku with a J, as in Jamaica. All right. And now, my pleasure to ask Dr. Stanley Nair to come up for the presentations.
Thank you very much, Dion. Can we give a round of applause for our host? Mrs. Dion Jackson Miller of great fame and fortitude. So, it is my pleasure today to announce the winners of the entire competition. We have come a couple of months, is it? Team, yes? And we are at the final day, but not the final competition. So, I'll start with the special awards. Most involved school. And this is awarded to the school that was most active across the platforms, the social media platforms, backstage, and with promotional engagement. And that prize goes to Glenmuir High School. The most improved school. This prize is presented to the school that demonstrated the most progress in argumentation and confidence throughout the competition. That prize goes to none other, St. Joseph Convent, Port of Spain. Give him another round of applause. The next special award, the Young Visionary Award, awarded to an outstanding debater under 16 who showed exceptional promise and leadership in advocacy. This goes to Clara Byford of Rollins Academy. And this is actually the school out of the UK that entered. The next award is that of the Congeniality Award. This is an award where the vote is by fellow competitors for the most respectful, friendly, and collaborative team throughout the competition. And this award goes to Holy Childhood High School. Now we move on to the individual awards. The Spirit Award, given to the debater who brought unmatched energy, passion, and commitment to every single round. And that student is not here today. Casey Mann from Marine. Casey Marin from Arima North Secondary in Trinidad. The other individual award, Most Outstanding Male Debater. This recognizes a top performing male debater for excellence in speech, strategy, and delivery. The award goes to Sheldon Ramdan. I have to check the cursive here. From Barangpur. The best reply speaker, awarded to the most effective closing arguments and rebuttals. This student is from Montego Bay High, and it is is it Onessa Clayton? I see the teams agree. Grand final best debater, presented to the top performing debater in the final match for exceptional reasoning and impact. The award goes to Kelly. I tell you, I have to check the handwriting. Kelly's Mitchell. The next award is that of the best overall debater, awarded to the most consistent and high-performing debater across the entire competition. None other than Julian Solomon. And of course, we know she had help from her mother, who is a lecturer at the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies. The award you should share with Mom. Now we go on to team awards. Fourth place, the semi-finalist. This is a certificate and a cash award to the team placing fourth overall. And that, of course, goes to Hampton School in Jamaica. And we have a teacher here representing. The third place team award, a trophy plus a cash award per member with individual replica trophies. That award for third place goes to Queen's College. The second place team award, of course, trophy, a cash award, and individual replica trophies to none other than Clarendon College.
I don't want to do any art. I'm going to sleep. Oh, this is over.
the Champion Team Award, the largest trophy, cash award in representing a scholarship per member, individual trophies, and a book donation to the school library goes to none other than St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. Please remain. There's a book. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And last but not at all least, the Teachers Awards. The first place Teachers Award, a certificate with a cash award. The team coached, the champion team, coached by this teacher. In fact, it's two teachers here. Simon Wilkes and Gail Cool. Cool. Miss Gail Cool, yes.
Wilkes, yes. I have breakdowns. This is so funny. Gosh, I remember first match. It's just that first match was just yeah. That experience.
Now for the second place Teachers Award. It's certificates and a cash award. Clarendon College's Demare McLeod and Sonia White Thompson. The penultimate award, third place Teachers Award, certificates, plus a cash award. Mr. Riaz Rupnarain and Joel McFoy from Guyana. And the fourth place Teachers Award, same certificates and a cash award. Mr. Tevin Cameron and Mrs. Penelope Green Daly. And these would be from Hampton. Now let's give them all one big round of applause. All our finalists and all our prize winners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesus.
Okay, and of course, you know, we always have to give thanks. So let's ask Brian Royce of the Repair campaign to come and give us a vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Senator the Honorable Dana Morris Dixon, Minister of Education, Skills, Youth and Information, Her Excellency Judith Slater, High Commissioner of the United Kingdom to Jamaica, distinguished guests, students, teachers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Brian Royce on behalf of the Repair campaign, and it's my privilege to offer the vote of thanks to close this electrifying and insightful finals of the International Reparation Debate Competition. What a journey it has been, am I right, teams? From the first round with 24 schools to today's electrifying grand finals. We've witnessed brilliance, boldness, and passionate commitments to justice from every single participant, and I could not be more inspired. First and foremost, let us extend our heartfelt thanks to the organizers and sponsors, without whom this event could not have happened. I want to thank the University of the West Indies for their guidance and the use of this space. And also want to recognize CARICOM and the CARICOM Reparations Commission for your support in bringing this debate to life. I have to salute the Center for Reparation Research for their meticulous leadership and organization of the several rounds of this debate. Hear, hear. To Professor Sonia Stanley Nair, the Director of the Center for Reparation Research, your pioneering leadership and vision has brought this incredible event from conception to execution. And we have to recognize the inimitable Tricia Osborne, Mia McMorris from the Center for Reparation Research, the glue that has held us all together. Of course, Melissa Beckford, thank you so much for all of your guidance and steering. And of course, to the Jamaica Association for Debating and Empowerment, Ravon Thomas Matthews, Jermaine Barrett, and the wider team for your debate and adjudication expertise, which has been crucial at each step of the debate, from organization to execution. To our adjudicators, High Commissioner Judith Slater, Professor Rupert Lewis, Ravon, Jermaine, Javon Downey, your presence and depth has added depth and credibility to the finals of this competition and each step of the way. We know how much focus and energy it takes to weigh these debates fairly, and we deeply appreciate your thoughts and the lens that you've brought to this table. To my colleagues from the Repair campaign, for the technical assistance, the behind-the-scenes production, social media management, and sponsorship, we're grateful. I want to especially thank UETV and the UE Press for helping to bring this debate to life, not only online, but also in person, and helping to make these students look as brilliant as they sounded in these rounds. And also grateful to Andre McPeart for producing our online rounds at each step of the way. Gratitude as well to the PJ Patterson Institute of Africa Caribbean Public Advocacy and the University of Hull for sponsoring this event and adding your international reach within global Africa and the UK. A big thank you to our phenomenal MC, Miss Dion Jackson Miller, for guiding today's program with such wisdom and professionalism. And of course, definitely not least, our debaters. What a phenomenal showcase of passion, research, critical thinking. Whether you stood for or against, each round, every one of you represented not just yourselves or your countries, but a broader commitment to truth and justice, which is absolutely critical in this modern conversation. To the teachers, we have to specifically recognize your unending support for the students, guiding their research and the logistics on the grounds at each step of the debate in your respective countries. Of course, to our volunteer behind-the-scenes teams, thank you for keeping everything running smoothly. And finally, to you, our very engaged audience, both here and online, and across the Caribbean and the UK, thank you for showing up and tuning in and listening. Your presence and engagement affirms that reparatory justice is no longer a conversation that can be swept under the rug, and that the time is now for reparations to take center stage. So thank you as well to our fantastic poet, Casey, for your powerful poems, which go a long way as well for adding that humanistic element of advocacy, which is much needed on this international stage. As this inaugural staging of the International Reparation Debate Competition comes to a close, let us not lose the momentum that we have built through these debates. These vibrant conversations about history, reconciliation, and repair must continue in our schools, in our communities, in our art and cultural consciousness, in our halls of government, by our leaders, not only within the Caribbean and global Africa, but within the former colonial governments themselves, including the UK, the European Union, and beyond. I hope we all leave here feeling inspired. I know I certainly have. And that we share the knowledge that we've gained through these students and are called to action to stand in solidarity with the calls for reparation as they continue to grow across the Caribbean and internationally. We invite you to get connected with the Center for Reparation Research in their education and advocacy, with the CARICOM Reparations Commission, the Repair Campaign, and learn more about how you can take action, standing in solidarity, and to tangibly advance CARICOM's movement for reparations, as what Professor Sir Hilary Beckles has called the greatest political tide of the 21st century. The time is now, so please do engage. And on behalf of the entire team here present, I just want to end by saying thank you, thank you,